the
Perfect.
webinar.
All right, fantastic. We are live. Hello and welcome. My name is Rebecca Tasetano, and I will be hosting the Birds of Three Habitats workshop presented today by the Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park. This will be a 45 to 50-minute presentation, after which our speaker will answer questions. You'll notice that on your Zoom dashboard, at the bottom, you have a Q&A icon. When you click on that Q&A icon at the bottom, a box will appear, and it's here where you can type your question. Your question will be answered at the 45 to 50-minute mark, but you can ask your question at any time, again, by going to the bottom of the screen and clicking on the Q&A icon. Please note that everyone's mic is muted, so submit your questions by clicking on that Q&A icon. The Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead would like to thank the Gulf Coast Community Foundation for their generous grant, which has made this webinar possible. You can learn more about this fine organization by visiting www.gulfcoastcf.org. Now let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker today is Jeanne Dubi. Before moving to Florida in 1997, she lived in New York City and was the vice president or general manager of Harper's Magazine. She is now the president of the Sarasota Audubon Society, and she devotes much of her time to birding and to the conservation of bird habitat in Sarasota. Many of you have asked if this webinar will be available online. It will be available online, and we'll give you more details at the end of the presentation. Until then, let's give a warm virtual welcome to Jeanne Dubi.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to share birds of our Gulf Coast region with you. In Florida, we are lucky to, in this particular part of Florida, we're lucky to have coastal wetland and woodland habitat, as well as other transitional habitats. But I'm going to talk to you about these three specific ones today, and what kinds of birds you can find in each habitat. So a coastal habitat, as you know, has warm Gulf waters, sandy beaches, back beach dunes if the beaches are wide enough, as in, say, Siesta Key and Lido Key, and few trees. This gives the birds a good sight line for their predators and for their prey, actually. So here we have the brown pelican. You've all seen brown pelicans. It's an iconic bird of our waters. We're all thrilled to see it, especially the first time we've ever seen it. They may all look alike to you, but this particular one is an adult in breeding plumage. Some birds, when they change into breeding plumage, have more subtle changes than others. But the next time, sorry, this is very sensitive. Let me go back. The next time you look at a brown pelican, see if you can see a yellow head and a mahogany neck. And if you do, you'll know that that bird is in breeding plumage. If it has just a regular sort of dun color, it's probably a juvenile. Now, laughing gulls are the predominant gull on our beaches, and you've probably all heard them with their laughing call. But these birds are devilish. I call them rogue birds. And why are they rogues? Because they steal food and they predate other young birds, and they're always hanging around beachgoers. So please don't feed this bird. Oh, that happened quickly. So royal terns, here we have royal terns. Terns are a different kind of beach bird. Their flight is buoyant. This is a royal tern, and you can see it has an orangey bill and a shaggy head crest. So look for those next time you're on the beach. And then we have sandwich terns, smaller than royals. And look, they have the black bill. And see that little mustard tip at the end of the bill? That's one way that you can distinguish between, that you can be able to identify a sandwich tern. Buoyancy, the flight is very buoyant, and there are plenty of them on our beaches. You should be able to ID these. Now, these birds are also sandwich terns, and here the two in the front are probably males trying to court the female in the back. They're trying to offer these small fish to her. If she accepts one of these, that means that she is accepting that individual as a breeding mate, and there we go. Eggs and chicks later. Here's a Forster's tern. Note the red legs, and you can see here, this is a non-breeding bird. Breeding birds usually come into their plumage and it lasts for about maybe 8 weeks or 10 weeks, and then they go out of their breeding plumage. But it's a signal to mates in order that they're getting ready to breed. Here we have a mixed flock of terns. You can see the royals, you can see the sandwich, see them right here? But this guy, look how big this one is. This is a Caspian tern. It's actually the largest tern in the world. And you usually only see them on their own. You don't see them in groups like the royals. But look for those on the beach too. And they like inland waters. You can see them at Mayaca River, for example. Here's a heron. We have 11 or 12 different herons in Florida. This is a strictly coastal heron, and look how incredible this bird is. You can see the image on the right. It's got a very pink bill, the shaggy crest. It's a reddish egret, and we don't have many of them left in Florida, maybe about 400 breeding pairs, but you can see them at Lido and at Siesta. This yellow-crowned night heron, look at the size of the eyes. This is well adapted to feeding at dusk and dawn, and it feeds on ghost crabs and any young chick it can find on the beach. It's quite a predator, actually. And here we have, I call it our biggest heartache, snowy plovers. See these little chicks? They're like cotton balls on matchsticks, and we are having terrible trouble on our beaches trying to protect them. They like to nest on Siesta Key, but for the last 2 years, although they produced eggs and some young have hatched, none of them have reached maturity. So black skimmers, look at this odd bird. Uses the lower part of its bill to skim the water. And they are colonial nesters. On Lido Key in June and July, you can see maybe 300 to 500 of them in a group, all setting up for their breeding. And look at this little guy trying to eat this huge fish. Least terns, this is another imperiled species. They come from South and Central America to breed on our beaches, and they are much predated by laughing gulls, by night herons, by ghost crabs and dogs. Please don't take your dog on the beach, because this is one of the real problems that we have for our beach nesting birds. Red knots, you may have heard about red knots. They breed up in the Arctic, and most of them spend the winters down close to the Antarctic. Much studied. If you see a bird with this tag, you can always let one of us know at Sarasota Audubon, and we can report it. Some of them do spend their winters in Florida. So now we're into wetland habitat, flat, open, swamp vegetation, and few trees. And here, this is a real wonderful place for all the herons. This is a tricolor heron. Notice the white belly. This one at the bottom one is probably a juvenile, hasn't reached full color yet, but the light also can play tricks when you're photographing birds. It's a green heron, much smaller, shorter legs, very secretive, likes to perch on branches overlooking the ponds. This one here it's raised its crest, so it's alarmed, and it yaks and yaks when it is alarmed. But these birds can be found in swamps, under trees, down in Venice at the Venice Rookery. Here's a roseate spoonbill, fantastic looking bird, totally amazing. I mean, this is just incredible. And they take about 4 years to mature. This one here is a full adult. It's got the lovely crimson shoulders, yellow at the lower throat, and an orange bill. If you ever see these, if you get close, see if you can spot these particular characteristics. Absolutely gorgeous bird. Everybody loves to see it. Great egrets. They're tall, and they have a yellow bill, black feet, black legs. And here they're having a bit of a fight, a competitive fight. And this one here in flight, you can see this very, very lovely color green. The lores, that's between the eyes and the bill. And that means it's in full breeding plumage. So you could, next time you see one, see if you can find that. Here's a snowy egret, much smaller than a great egret. And it has a black bill and yellow feet, so quite in reverse. So if you can, sometimes you can't see the feet because they're usually in water, but you can certainly tell it by the black bill. It's a cute bird. You can find this in many places. This is a winter resident, this teeny wren. You can find this, excuse me, you can find it at the celery fields, in the bulrushes. Usually quite vocal. You hear them rather than see them actually, but it's a cute little bird, and we all look forward to seeing those in the winter. This is a Sora. This is another winter visitor, looks a bit like a chicken. It stays close to the ground in marshy vegetation, and you can see these mostly early in the morning. Again, at the celery fields, that's a very good place to see them. A snipe, another winter visitor, and you actually, they're hard to pick up in the vegetation because they're well camouflaged, but if you get close enough, they'll explode right out of the vegetation and fly off in a zigzag direction. And so that's, look for that. This is a least-bitten, a small heron of bulrushes. Another secretive bird, very difficult to see in the winter. And the only time you can really see them well is in breeding season, because they're so busy feeding their young that they can't afford to be secretive. They have to get out there and get the food. So at the celery fields in May is the best time to see those. This is an American bittern, much bigger than the least bitten, and it's a stalker through the marshes. It's a winter visitor too. They go very, very slowly, and the camouflage is incredible. And even if you're right on top of them, sometimes it's hard to see them. Black-necked stilts. Look at those incredibly long legs. Even in the young, they're hatched with very, very long legs. They do breed in our area, and they're winter residents. You see them at Mayaka, you see them at the celery fields, and they're very, very vocal when they're breeding. If you come anywhere near them or near their chicks, they're apt to yip at you, and sometimes can even dive bomb you. Here's an American coot. It's in the gallinaceous family. Seen mostly in winter, sometimes in large raft. A raft is a big group that you would see on a pond. And you can notice the white bill and the dark body. As opposed to this, is in the same family, but this is the most common bird you see on ponds. You can notice the red bill with the yellow tip. and they are incredibly prolific breeders. Often the juveniles help to tend and rear the younger siblings, and sometimes you can see whole family groups of all different ages together. So you should be able to see this quite readily. This bird, purple gallinule, is again in the gallinaceous family. Absolutely gorgeous bird, beautiful purpley color with that light blue shield, red bill, yellow tip. They use their toes to clamber up the stalks. So they bunch them together to get right up on top of the stalks to pick off the flowers. And they are, the young of these birds are always dark or black to be well camouflaged in the marsh vegetation. And here's a sandhill crane. You've all seen those. We're always delighted to see these birds. They build their nest in a pond. The vegetation is just a little above the water line. And in times of floods, by the way, they can get washed away. But here's a couple of little ones that will soon be walking all around and following their parents. This is, here I'm going to show you a lovely video of a get-together of sandhill cranes. This usually happens in January, late December, January, and February. So let's just see if this will play for you. It's wonderful to hear.
The sandhill crane is a tall, elegant dancer. The adult can stand 4 feet tall and has a 6-foot wingspan. Mated pairs will remain together for the entire year. Typically, 1 or 2 chicks, called colts, stay with their parents for 9 to 10 months. These cranes are the oldest known living species of bird, with fossils dating back over 9 million years. Watching these birds gather for the evening is like watching a prehistoric honky-tonk. They come from here, they come from there, they come from just about everywhere. Some come by land, others by air. They come as singles, come as pairs. The sun's going down, let's go unwind. I know the place, have a good time, and if you're looking for a little romance, come on and join the dance. There are families and friends, and a few out alone, looking for someone to call their own. Shy ones and sly ones, and dudes with two, couples trying to get in the mood. The sun's going down, let's go unwind. I know the place, have a good time, and if you're looking for a little romance, come on and join the dance. Come on and join the dance.
Wasn't that fun? That was taken at the celery fields, actually, about maybe 5 years ago. And it's just one of those delightful things that we love to show. Now here's a limpkin. These are very, these birds can be found throughout Florida, possibly some in Louisiana and in Georgia, but predominantly in Florida. And bird watchers who come to Florida very specifically to see this bird. And you may have heard it screaming, because they do scream when they're ready to do their breeding. And this one here is in full scream. And this one is sitting on a nest. Looks like it's got 3 eggs there. And they're beginning to gather right now to breed. And we will be looking for little chicks, maybe the end of December and early January. So these are quite common I live in the meadows. There you can see them in the meadows, and they're also quite abundant at the celery fields. They feed on apple snails, which are predominant food source in the celery fields. Here's an anhinger. This bird you've probably seen resting on a perch, drying its wings. This is a male. It's got the lovely white, black and white wings. And you can see right here the oil gland, just at the top of the tail. It takes that oil with its bill and distributes it throughout its feathers in order to keep it waterproof. Because unlike ducks, they are not actually waterproof. So take a look. And this is a very good photo done by one of our members. It's the first time I've seen the photograph of that gland, but you can often see them preening. Boat-tailed grackle, a very common bird in marshes. This is a male, lovely, glossy, black, metallic. And this is the female, very brown. When most people see this bird on its own, they wonder if it's a new bird, but it's actually the female of the species. And they're actually harem breeders. One male will be in control of several females and defend its territory. They're quite, you can see them in bulrushes and cattail marshes. Red-winged blackbird, another lovely bird of our marshes. Look at those gorgeous epaulets with the red and the yellow. And they have that creaky, rusty door sound that you can hear all over the place in breeding season in the right habitat, probably at the Venice rookery, and also, of course, at the celery fields. Bald eagles, female. Female is larger than the male, and they're fish eaters, but they're also carrion eaters. They can steal fish from ospreys or from anybody, actually. They can also, I have seen them go after coots. To remember the photo of the American coot, they will go after a raft of American coots and grab one, hold it with its talons and drown it, and then they will take that away and eat it. So they are beginning to gather together in pairs and to start breeding in our area. You may know of a nest nearby, and we do have eagle watchers who watch these nests to make sure that the trees don't get cut down and so on. So now we're into woodland habitat here. Trees, of course, shrubs, and tons of hiding places, very many hiding places. And this is the most difficult kind of bird watching because of all the leaves, all the limbs, and because many of the birds are very tiny. This is a Cooper's hawk. It's a terror to woodland birds. It can fly through, navigate through trees quite easily. It uses its tail to navigate through, and it can hangs around at feeders, by the way, and grabs the birds at the feeders. But it's a magnificent looking bird. This is an adult, and you can see the sort of fierce look about it. A red-shouldered hawk. This is the most abundant raptor you will see. Often you've seen this perching upright on wires and poles. and eats mostly small reptiles and bugs. This, I don't know what this is, maybe a mole cricket or something. I just had two out my backyard this morning, actually mating. So they're getting ready to start nesting. Owls, we have a number of owls in our area, and the most common is the barred owl, barring along there, along the breast. Sometimes you can see them perched if you look carefully in the trees. You have to be really a good spotter to see them, but it's not unrealistic to find one. Now here's a small bird, maybe 5 inches. It's in the vireo family. Vireos are vermifores. They eat caterpillars and worms, and they have a little hook at the end of the bill, and it's good for catching wriggly caterpillars. You can see these along the Legacy Trail in Osprey State Park. And in this also, this blue-gray gnatcatcher, tiny little bird, very active, always on the move. And this you would also see along the Legacy Trail in Osprey State Park. We have them at the celery fields. I have them in my backyard. They're quite a common bird, but tiny, so very difficult to see. This is a prairie warbler, beautiful. Not found on prairies, by the way, so completely misnamed. Mainly coastal species. Their preferred habitat is mangroves, but of course our mangroves have disappeared, most of them. So this bird is really under stress in terms of its where it can breed. Sometimes it moves inland to thickets of Brazilian pepper, because in some cases Brazilian peppers can sort of mimic the look of mangroves, very dense and tangled vegetation. Gorgeous little bird, maybe 4.5 inches. These woodland birds, these small birds can be very difficult to see. And it's really more experienced birders that can find these birds. And if you are interested in becoming a birder, start with the herons, start with the beach birds, because they're much easier to see. So here we have a tufted titmouse. Lovely little tuft on top of its head, very vocal bird, loves the oak trees, and it feeds on the or any kind of insect that are in the oaks. Oaks are wonderful, by the way. And see that lovely apricot color under the wing? You can see, you can spot that. That lovely black beady eye, just a very delightful little bird. Woodpeckers, we have a number of woodpeckers in our area. This is the one that you would most commonly see or hear in your backyard. This is a male. It's a red-bellied woodpecker. Again, not a perfect name for it. Only in the breeding season does it get a sort of a pinkish flush at the base of its belly. So whoever named that bird didn't get it right. But this is a male. The red extends all the way from the nape of the neck all the way around to the forehead. This downy woodpeckers, teeny little things, probably about 6 to 7 inches. And this is a male with this red spot. The female does not have the red spot. They are denizens of our area. They breed here, they winter here. And you can often hear their high-pitched whinny, but they're absolutely delightful little birds to see. And here, of course, is our pileated woodpecker, the largest of our woodpeckers. To me, it reminds me of Woody Woodpecker. It's just so wonderful. Several years ago, I had a call from somebody in, I think in Lee County, who said she had the ivory-billed woodpecker in her backyard. Now, the ivory-billed woodpecker is extinct, and it has much more white in its plumage, looks similar to this. And I said to her, have you taken a photograph? So she said no, and I said, you know what? I don't think you've got an ivory-billed woodpecker. I think it's a pileated. And she said, no, it's an ivory-billed, it's an ivory-billed. And I said, well, here's the thing. If you've got an ivory-billed woodpecker in your backyard, you can expect to have thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming to see it, because that bird has been extirpated in the United States. So you have to be very careful. And I never heard from her again, because very often there is white in the wing when they fly. And so people have been confused by that. We also have birds that migrate through Florida. Florida is one of the migratory routes from the north, from the northern parts to the Caribbean and Central and South America. And the time of year when we look forward to these is in the spring when they go north, and in the fall when they come south. We're just finishing up the southern migration. And I saw this bird in my backyard not too long ago. This is called a scarlet tanager. They have very strong bills. They like berry eating and seed eating. Absolutely gorgeous bird. Black wings, very, very, if people see this, sometimes they think they're looking at a cardinal, but if you do, just take another look. And here's a rose-breasted grosbeak. This is a male. Absolutely gorgeous bird also. And look at the female. In most species where the male is brightly colored, the female is generally very dully colored. And that's because she has to sit motionless on a nest, and it's much better for her to blend into her environment. And so that's why. And also the males, of course, are the ones that attract the females by showing off their wonderful colors. Most birds that do have this strong breeding plumage, they molt out the feathers. The feathers don't change color. What happens is they molt out the old feathers and the new ones come in. And this transitional period can take, maybe 6 to 8 weeks before they molt out the old and get in the full color. This particular bird, the rose-breasted grosbeak, actually maintains its color all year long. But what would probably happen in breeding plumage, the red would be much redder and the black and white would be much starker. This is a red stud. Now this is a bird probably about 4.5 inches, 5 inches tops. Beautiful little bird. It fans its tail as it flits from tree to tree, gleaning insects. And I've had these in my backyard in migration, but I don't see any more now. They've probably gone to South America, but a delightful bird to see. I also saw this in my backyard, Blackburnian warbler, absolutely gorgeous, flame color under the throat, under the chin. And just absolute stunning bird. Another 4 or 5 inches, and you get very fleeting looks at these birds in the trees. So if you are if you want to become a birder, don't start with these because you'll get very frustrated. Here's a golden winged warbler, another stunner. The gold in the wing and the gold on top. These, we don't see very many of these. These nest up in the Appalachians and come through, and we often can see them gleaning insects in the cluster of dead leaves in a tree. Here's a black-throated blue warbler, black-throated blue back, tiny bird, can feed on berries, can feed on insects. Generally speaking, lower canopy birds. Some birds are very high in a canopy. This one is sort of mid to low story birds. So when we go birding, we look up high, we look low, we look all over the place. This is a hooded warbler. The hood, this is a male with the hood. The female doesn't have the extensive hood, but they often fan their tails and their wings when they flit from tree to tree. So oftentimes the behavior can help us identify what birds that we can get a glimpse of. And so this is another low canopy bird. And so it's just look for it, from the ground up. Chestnut-sided warbler, well named, lovely chestnut along the flank, sort of a limey Head, another tiny bird, gleaning insects up. Can be quite high up actually. When we're looking at birds very high up in the canopy, we say we suffer from warbler neck because we're straining our heads to look up and we can really get a warbler neck. Here's a cerulean warbler. The main identifying feature of this is this necklace, this bluish necklace. And this is in the male only, by the way. The female is more sort of drab color, more greenish actually. This is also a lowish canopy bird that we can find fairly low to the ground, feeding away. Here's a parula, northern parula. Some people say parula, I say parula. We do have some remaining during the winter, and they breed here. They nest actually in hanging moss. So you can see how lightweight they would be if they can build a nest in some hanging moss. So this is a male, it's got sort of a breast band. Oh, sorry about that. I think I'm on a timer with these, and this is why I'm going back and forth. This is a breast band in the male, and they have a pretty good eye ring. And they're quite vocal actually in breeding season. Now this looks like a big bird, but it isn't. All of these small birds are small, 5.5 inches. This is a protonotary warbler. The word comes from ecclesiastical, where the notaries used to wear a red, a sort of a goldy color hood. They like being around water more than anything. And so when we go into a park like Pancraft Park, we will go along the water's edge and look for these birds sort of in the hanging vegetation over water. Every bird has its niche. This is called a blue-winged warbler, more steely blue than blue actually. We do identify this with this, I call it mascara between the eye. It's the lores really, between the eye and the bill. And another small bird that can be flitting around high or low actually. All of these birds that I'm showing you have been seen in Oscar Shearer State Park. This is a beautiful bird. We love to see this bird because it's just so gorgeous with its coloring. I don't think anybody in Sarasota saw this bird during migration this year. So sometimes, you know, some birds are more abundant than others. This is a male. The female certainly doesn't look like that. So then we have some birds that breed further north and migrate through the Americas, but actually some stay in Florida for the winter. So we love that. And here's a few of those. So indigo buntings, you may have seen these. If you're up from the north, you may have seen these in Michigan or in Minnesota or so in the fields. But one of the things that we have to do in Florida is we have to learn to identify birds in their non-breeding plumage. So we very rarely will see the indigo bunting in this bright, brilliant blue. More often than not, it's like this. And we know it's a male because it does retain some blue in the wings. And a female would have absolutely no blue, would be a drab brown color. So that's an indigo bunting. You can look for those in grasses. And look at this bird, isn't this incredible? I've had these in my backyard, and we have these also at the celery fields at the Nature Center. Incredible color. I say it must have been designed by a committee. Somebody said, oh, blue. Somebody said red. Somebody said yellow. Put it all together and you have this incredible bird. It breeds in Northwest Florida and the Carolinas actually, and and in Texas. There's quite a number of them in Texas. Seed eaters. They come to feed us and they prefer white millet. If you have a feeder outside in your backyard, put some white millet and see what happens. They do like dense vegetation, overgrown, non-manicured. They're not good with manicured lawns. This is a female. She's gorgeous in her own right. And the young actually are this color until they until the males become very bright. But see, well camouflage, where she's sitting on a nest, would be very hard to see her. So then we have yellow-rumped warblers. In their breeding area, they look like this, which is lovely. But when they get to Florida, they look like this. So we call them butterbutts because they have a nice yellow butter color on their butts above their tail, the lower part of their back. And they are, they come in groups, and very often there'll be, 10 or 12 of them together. So you can look for those. And here is a similar looking bird. It's called a palm warbler. We very rarely see it in breeding plumage, but notice where the yellow is. It's below the tail as opposed to above the tail, and it pumps its tail a lot. And I have out of my backyard, I have a bit of a lawn out here, and they're mostly on the ground. And if you see a small bird like this and it's pumping its tail, then you're looking at a palm warbler. So look for those. They're here now. They've arrived. Tree swallows. So up north, they'll find nest boxes or hollows in trees, and they will nest on their own. But in the winter, they actually gather in huge flocks. And it's the only bird of the swallow hirundi family that spends the entire winter in the United States. They do not go to the Caribbean. And they don't go to the Caribbean. And years ago, before Benderson was developed into a rowing lake, we had 1 million or so, at least 1 million of them descending into the cattail marshes to roost. And it was a most incredible sight. And if you're so inclined, go to YouTube and click and type in tree swallows, and you will be able to see some of these marvelous flocks descending into their roost areas. It's really a sight worth seeing. It's almost as good as looking at the wildebeest migration in Africa. So give that a whirl. So Sarasota Audubon Society, and I'm the president of it. I've been the president off and on for about 14 years. It's very hard to get replacements. We have a marvelous nature center. It's actually closed until January the 1st at least because of COVID. But when you're so inclined, please come and visit us. It would be lovely to see you. This is our building, LEED Gold certified building. This is our patio with benches. This is our donor tree, the name of every person who helped us raise $1.4 million for this center. And so their name is there. We also have a gazebo, a favorite spot for photographers, by the way, because right behind here to the left, we have a fountain, an open area, and we have bird feeders there. We actually don't have the feeders there at the moment because we're concerned about people gathering in the gazebo during COVID. But when COVID's all over, please come and visit us at the gazebo. It's a wonderful place to be. We have children's programs, again, on hold at the moment, but we have funded, thousands of school kids coming to the celery fields to learn about birds and learn about the natural environment. And here we have a whole group of kids who are learning their work. They have to, at the end of each of their projects, they have to draw pictures of birds and have a narrative as well. So we're waiting for the days when we can launch all of our programs all over again. I want to thank the people who have contributed their photographs to this. Some of the photographs are absolutely incredible. And there we have it. Sarasota Audubon, protecting birds and our environment. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I think it's going to be recorded for you to be able to view it at another time. Thank you.
Yes, most certainly will. Thank you so much, Jeanne. Let's give Jeanne a round of applause, a virtual round of applause. We really enjoyed your presentation. And now we come to the moment where it is time for our Q&A. So again, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. If you think of a question that you want to ask Jeanne while I ask the questions that have already been proposed in the Q&A, feel free to click on Q&A and ask your question there. Jeanne, we have several questions coming in. The first question is from Carol, who asks, what would be the timeline for general wintering migration?
Migration, we start to look for birds in September and October are the heavy months for migration in the winter. And that's where all the birds are coming south. But actually we can spot some birds in July and August and some latecomers coming through in December. But September and October are the heavy months for migration in winter.
Great, thank you very much. And Margaret asks, what trees, shrubs, and plants do you suggest to attract birds to my yard in Sarasota County?
Well, anything native, I would say. Any plants that are exotic or introduced, some of the lovely plants that we love from Asia or so, they're not really adapted. The birds don't adapt to them. So you should really be, if I were you, it depends on the size of your yard. And if you want to, you can contact me privately and we can talk about it a little bit more. Certainly oaks, privet, Florida privet, wax myrtle is good. If you want to attract hummingbirds, which there's not a lot of hummingbirds in Florida, but I was able to attract hummingbirds to my yard with lantana and with sage and with porterweed. They love porterweed. If you're trying to attract hummingbirds, don't bother with feeders. Don't bother with a feeder because there's so many flowers around that they don't go to feeders. In my opinion, they don't go to feeders. So
I love seeing the hummingbirds in my backyard. Thank you for that suggestion. Would you mind going back one slide so we can see all the beautiful array of birds that you've talked to us about? And in the meantime, we have another question from Eleanor. Let me see. Oh, you kind of answered this question already, but Eleanor asks, how do you attract so many birds to your backyard?
Well, the house that I recently moved into this house in the meadows, and it has quite a different vegetation than the one I came from, which had a lot of overgrowth. It actually backed onto a wooded wetland. And so the lawn people didn't go in there and cut it down. So if you happen to be backing onto some wild area, that's really the best. Now here I am in the meadows, and I have I'm actually on a golf course. But fortunately, I have a lot of wonderful old oaks in between my house and the golf course. So I am seeing more birds that go to oak trees, like titmouse, the gnatcatchers, the warblers that came through. I haven't had a painted bunting, by the way, because the painted buntings need overgrown, unkempt vegetation. And grasses, they like grasses. So if you want to email me privately, I can give you a little more information. But it really depends on where your backyard is and what you have. If you're backing onto another house, that's some sort of limitation to that. So if you want to email me privately, I can help you with that.
And Jeanne, what is your email address for those of our audience that are interested?
You can get me at info at sarasotaAudubon.org.
Perfect. We have another question.
Yes.
Who says, we have a hawk around our yard and most birds are not coming to our feeder. Will it go away after a time?
Well, maybe not. It might be a Cooper's hawk, by the way, which, as I said before, frequents feeders. It's really a difficult question because in the end, you have to really let nature take its course. If there are no birds coming to the feeder, in the end, that hawk is going to go elsewhere because there's nothing for it to eat, nothing for it to catch. So I would say just be patient. And one of the things you can do is really record what you are seeing through a timeline. And that will give you, it's interesting to do that. I mean, how many weeks is it going to take for the hawk to get fed up and go elsewhere? Or how long is it going to be before some of the bold birds will come back to your feeder, like blue jays or cardinals? So even in the absence of birds, you can always be observing and studying and trying to figure out bird habits. So I would suggest you do that.
Fantastic. As development increases in our area, what is being done to protect birds?
Well, that's a struggle. Some communities are much better than others at trying to adapt. I know that Stony Brook, for example, the development in Palmer Ranch has a very, very active environmental program for which Sarasota Audubon is involved. I give presentations there. We do bird walks there. We try and engage the residents to be more mindful. And if the residents are so inclined, they can start to put pressure on management to change some of the vegetation, to do something with the ponds. As you know, most ponds tend to be sculpted and cleared of all vegetation. In the meadows, we have a very active environmental program where they're beginning to, where they have done and continue to do so, plant various aquatic plants around the ponds to attract birds, and not just birds, by the way, fish, reptiles, all of the things that are the web of life, actually. So we are engaged in that. We also, I just moved to the meadows about 4 months ago, and I have developed a PowerPoint that they're going to circulate to all of their members, trying to engage the members, letting them know what birds are here, and connecting with the environmental group. So there are ways to do it. You don't have to be completely passive and accept exactly what your management says to do. So those are some of the things. And we're also engaging the communities in helping us with our annual bird count. So I have set up a PowerPoint for the Christmas bird count to let people know what it is and how it and how they can engage in the more awareness we have of the bird life and animal life around us, the more we're inclined to help it. And it may be a long haul, but that's what we do.
It's a beautiful mission that you have, and it's so wonderful to see all the different birds that can be seen in the area when one is paying attention and when the environment is properly balanced. How beautiful.
It certainly is, and believe it or not, I think in Sarasota County we have recorded, I think it's about 320 species of birds. 320 species, that's incredible. In the United States, there are recorded about 900 species, maybe 950, something like that. But in Florida, about 600 species altogether. Some of them are just one-offs that come through, blown off course, and others are just, you know, our residents and our migrants and so forth. But in Sarasota County, 320 species of birds is a lot of birds. And in the celery fields itself, which is 400 plus acres, we have recorded 247 species. So there's a lot of birds out there, and many of them just go unnoticed. So, you know, when you're ready, come and take a walk with us at the celery fields, and we can start you on that wonderful journey of identifying birds.
Do you have a particular place in the celery fields that you like to point new bird watchers to?
Well, our nature center is in the celery fields, and that's where we start all of our programs. And so if you get onto our website, sarasotaudubon.org, you will see, as I said, we're not doing any walks at least until January the 1st, but under normal conditions, we have a very, very full slate of walks at the celery fields. And they originate at the nature center, and sometimes we go around the hill, and sometimes we go to the boardwalk. So it's 400 acres. There's plenty to do there.
Yes, that's a lot of space. I'm sure there are a lot of birds that use your space to rest or to roost.
Yes. Yeah.
We have a question about eagle watchers. Who are the eagle watchers, and how do you become an eagle watcher?
That's a program that is under the aegis of Audubon, Florida. Audubon, Florida is part of National Audubon, and they have, it's not a membership organization. They have offices in Florida, and the bird watching program originates out of their facility in Maitland, which is the other side of Orlando. If you email me, I can tell you about that. And the way it works is they get volunteers in certain parts of the state. So for example, if you know of a bald eagle nest nearby, you could contact them and tell them where it is. They probably know about it, by the way. And in all probability, there could be a watcher who watches that particular nest. And what they do is they usually go once a week or once every 2 weeks just to check on the birds to make sure that they're okay. And if there's anything amiss, if there's been an injury to a bird, or whether the homeowner has chopped down the tree when there's a nest there, which is against the law, by the way, you would then report it to your particular coordinator for your area, and they would then come and take the matter further. So it's a wonderful project, by the way, if you're interested in doing it. Again, I can, if you email me at info@sarasotaudubon.org, I can put you in touch with that facility, those people up there.
How interesting. I know a lot of people right now are looking for those new hobbies, and I've found it really rejuvenating to be out in nature. So that's such great information. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
We have a lot of people that are commenting on which types of birds they've seen in their local environment. Mm-hmm. Florence says that she caught the purple gallinule. Is that how you pronounce it? Purple gallinule?
Yes.
And her babies last summer at Celery Fields.
That's wonderful.
Dennis says he sees lots of ospreys in Florida, and he asks, do they migrate, remain year-round, or both?
The ospreys actually stay year-round, and fortunately in Florida you can see them quite readily, and some folks put in conjunction with FPL put up nesting platforms for them. Oftentimes they'll nest up on a cell tower, but they're abundant in Florida. And I tell you, I come from Britain, and they are not abundant in Britain. You have to go to Scotland to actually see an osprey. So when you come to Florida and you see them sort of everywhere, it's just, it's absolutely incredible. So they are year-round residents. And what was the other bird? Oh, the gallinule? The gallinule actually does migrate, believe it or not. But we also have some year-round residents at the celery fields. You can see them now, actually. But what happens during breeding season, there's probably an augmentation of their numbers, where some of them move up from the south, from Central America or the Caribbean, and come and nest at the celery fields and elsewhere throughout Florida, by the way, and around the Gulf Coast. So yes, you can see them all year long, but you can see more of them in breeding season, which would be, for them, would be, April and May is the heaviest season for breeding in Florida.
And we also have someone who says that they live in Stony Brook Palmer Ranch and have seen parrots and asks, where do the parrots come from?
Well, we have two kinds of, they're parakeets, by the way. Parakeet, the difference between a parrot and a parakeet is a parakeet has a long pointed tail, and a parrot has it's almost as though chopped off tail, square tail. So that's one way that you can tell the difference between a parakeet and a parrot. It doesn't really matter though, but it's just for information. But we have monk parakeets and we have black-hooded parakeets. I wonder if the viewer or the listener knows which one they're seeing.
That's a great question. I think it'll take a second for us to get a response, but if a response comes in, I will let you know.
But the black-hooded parakeets are more numerous. They're actually bigger, and they are they nest solitarily. They'll find a hole in a tree trunk or in a light pole and nest. The monk parakeets are actually colonial nesters and are very, very noisy. And they will find a palm tree, and there may be 24 in the palm tree, and they all screech and screech and screech. And that's one of the things that the folks on Siesta Key did not like, and they started to take down their palm trees. And consequently, the monk parakeets have actually reduced in numbers. So in all likelihood, your viewer is seeing black-hooded parakeets, has the black hood. And if you see them again, look for those red booties. They have lovely little red socks on.
How interesting. Is there anything else that you can think of that our viewers can do to put pressure on their local association? Or I think that you mentioned Florida Power and Light. Any powers that be to make our environment a little bit more friendly to these lovely birds?
Oh, well, one thing you might want to do is to actually join your local Audubon. There is one in Venice, by the way, our sister organization. We have Sarasota Audubon, and there's one in Manatee County as well. Maybe your folks are from all of those areas. And the first thing you do is, if you join, and it's a modest annual fee. I think Sarasota Audubon is $30, and the others are similar, maybe a little less, I don't know. But then you begin to get information, you begin to get knowledge, and as far as helping your community, if you're in touch with us, we can maybe help you with your community. It has to be one of those joining of desires. The management has to agree to it. You have to put in some work in order to get it done. It can't just be done because you say you want it done. There is actually effort put into it. So all of those things have to come into play in order to, enhance the environment. But that's what we do. That's what we try to do. So I would suggest you, and even if you don't become a member of Audubon, you can check out our website. There's a lot of stuff on our website. You can check into our website all the time to see what's going on. But we'd love to have you as members. We would love it.
Thank you. And thank you for your time in presenting this to us. It's such interesting information. The last question that I have is when we can expect for the migrating birds to leave our areas. So migration is in several forms. There's the migrants who come and stay in Florida and then go back north. That usually happens in April or May, when they feel those urges to get up onto their breeding grounds. And then we are part of a flyway. So we have all the birds that come through from Central and South America and the Caribbean flow through Florida. And that also is April and May are the big months for that particular migration. So painted buntings that I've had in my backyard in my old house for 12 years every winter would leave the first week in April. And they would return
to my home in the first week of October. And what was fascinating about that is that you could almost time it. Within 5 days of expecting them to leave or come, they would actually show up. So birds are much more habitual than we think. They have, they have their own built-in clocks. And so April and May are the big months for northbound migration.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for sharing your expertise, Jeanne. We really appreciate you. What a lovely presentation. I like to say this every time, but I think it's especially true this time, that if our audience was here and you could see them, they'd be on their feet giving you the standing ovation you deserve. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me, and get out there and look up.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, good. So have you closed down now?
No, not yet. The last thing that I have to say to everybody is thank you so much for joining. This is the 4th webinar in a series of webinars, and this is the final webinar that we have for this version of the presentation. All of us at Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park want to thank you for participating in this month-long series of seminars. Our sessions, Landscaping for Nature, Smart Cycling 101, a Plein Air Art Exhibition Critique, and today's Birds of 3 Sarasota Habitats were received with great interest through many amazing attendees like yourselves, and we're delighted by that enthusiastic response. We hope to bring you more quality content in the future. Again, my name is Rebecca Tasetano, representing Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.